Marcela Arenas. I work at Latham & Watkins. I've been there for a decade. I'm originally from Mexico. I practiced law in a law firm in Mexico before coming to the LLM. I see some Columbia students right now. I'm a Columbia alumnus. I'm very excited to be here.
Good morning. I'm Sam Saperstein. I run a team called Women on the Move at JP Morgan Chase, and it's our firm's global diversity effort for women. So we do a lot of work inside with people's careers, but also outside the firm. I get to work with entrepreneurs and with women and girls on their financial health. So it's a lot of different careers, businesses, and just personal finance work.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Feriapino. I'm Vice President of E-commerce and Consumer Enterprise Marketing and Data for the Estee Lauder companies. Now, that's like a mouthful. I've been with the company for 12 years, and I'm based out of New York, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
Excellent. Thank you all. And Jim Brennan, I'm a partner at BCG in New York. I help lead our consumer private equity business, and it's great to get to moderate this panel today. So thank you, everyone. We're talking about mentorship, which is obviously a pretty critical topic in business and the world today. I say the world because I've seen through my children how it goes all through life, not even just in careers. But from a career perspective, if you think around mentoring, I know you've all been mentors. It'd be great to hear a little bit about how you approach mentorship, how you do it, if that makes sense as an opening question. And whoever wants to jump in, just start.
Yeah, I'll start with that. I also love to distinguish between mentoring and sponsorship. We heard a little bit about that on the prior panel, and I'm a big proponent of sponsorship, so I think I'll start there. I think a sponsor, and I define a sponsor as someone who really actively pounds the table for you. So think of someone in the organization who has influence, who's in a position of power, who can really pull you up through the organization, give you a new job or even a stretch assignment. Think of someone there who can really play a significant role in your career, not just a mentor who might be a coach or someone you talk to from time to time. And I think a sponsor is a critical part of anyone's career success. If you look across your organizations and you see the people at the top, you can probably tell who's been actively sponsoring them. And so I look at that role and I try to counsel women to look for sponsors for themselves, to create those opportunities organically. And also I talk to men about being better sponsors to more diverse people, including women. So think of that difference for yourself, and I know we'll get into more of that later, but find a sponsor. I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do for your career.
Yeah, and then for me, I think my approach when I've been asked to be a sponsor, when I've taken on this role, is to really understand what is that mentee's objectives. You know, what I considered that I wanted from a sponsor, you know, at the beginning of my career is different from what a person wants now. So really understanding that it's a two-way street and how can you add the most value to somebody as their mentor is critical.
And I think that is a very good point about what they try to accomplish. And as a mentee of, you know, who you look for perspective. And that is very key because it may not be someone that is in your field of work. It can be correlated, but it's something that I came to realize as I'm growing in my career that, you know, from what perspective I want to get from my mentor. And again, they're not going to find solutions for me, but give me that broad perspective to give me the tools to make that decision.
I think it's great, and I think it's interesting that you've all talked about tools, how it helps advancement, but specifically the word sponsorship. Interestingly, at BCG, when someone becomes a partner, they are sponsored by someone. It's actually the phrase that is used, and that, you know, I've done that a few times in my career, which is pretty exciting to get to do. How do you think mentorship/sponsorship helps in someone's career? What does it drive? What does it do beyond obviously the fact that advice is great and support is great, but what does it tangibly do for someone, right, as they think about their career and driving forward?
I think particularly a sponsor who's really working to propel you forward is giving you feedback and actively working with you, probably in a way that a day-to-day manager or even a mentor probably isn't. So when I think of a sponsor, you know, not only are they pounding the table for you, they're talking about you behind closed doors and really advocating for you, but they're giving you feedback. And I really encourage you to take that feedback, as hard as it is sometimes or painful to hear, to take it to heart, because a sponsor is someone who has your best interests at heart. Hopefully it's a trusted relationship. And so they're probably holding up a mirror to you and pointing out those blind spots that you might not see otherwise. And I think it's really tragic. We've probably all seen people get to a certain point in their careers with feedback that they just never got before. And at a certain point, it really holds them back from becoming a more senior leader. So a sponsor is someone who's going to show you that feedback, tell you that feedback, probably point out, other ways you can do things. And I think you just have to listen to it and hear it. You might not always take the feedback, but you should always go back and say, I heard you, and I did this or that, and here's how it turned out. So be very responsive, too, when you get that feedback.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you can find a sponsor that's not necessarily somebody above you, but that is your peer. And I think where that comes into play, the specific point around feedback, there's nobody that's going to be more honest with you than your peer. I think that's what I've sought from peers that I consider sponsors as well in different areas of the company, is seeking out that feedback, that honest feedback. Sometimes when you go to your managers, you don't even have time to have those conversations, or they just happen a couple times a year, or the feedback is not always great if there's a situation. But I think having that ongoing cycle of feedback with people that that will be honest with you, and being able to hear it and to respond to it is super important.
Yeah, and while a sponsor can be a mentor too, I encourage to have someone, have other mentors aside from the sponsor. So again, the relationship with the sponsors and what the sponsor gets can be a little bit more tangible. That is, in my world, expanding, the practice and make it probably at the end game more profitable. So it does have a little bit more of a tangible return, while, a mentor definitely has, returns. I get a lot of feedback and in the mentoring up that we'll talk about on the concept. But, again, going back to the perspective, I think, from a sponsor, it's going to be that mentorship, guided towards that growth, while the mentor is going to give you a little bit more advice of the full picture to it, and that of growing not only into that position with your sponsor, but also outside of it.
Yeah, very much agree. One of the things I learned early in my career, that someone who reviews you is not necessarily a sponsor or a mentor, and you need to figure out the difference between that, right, as you roll along. But how do you pick or find, right, a mentor or a sponsor, the matchmaking element of it? Like, how does it happen? Because I've definitely talked to more junior colleagues over the years who are like, well, how do I figure out who's going to do that for me? Like, what drives it?
I think if I could just jump in, taking a step back as I was preparing for this, I looked up, like, what is the true meaning of mentorship? And what I found was the act or process of guiding another person to support their personal development. And what struck me about that is that it said personal and not professional, because at the end of the day, mentorship is about people. So, I am on a personal note, lost my mother when I was very young. My father was a widow at almost 40. So you can imagine throughout my life, my early life, I had many people step into mentorship roles, whether it was teachers, mothers, friends of my mother's who at times maybe wanted to date my dad, but I had, I had a lot of support.
That's not best practice.
Yeah. I mean, he was 40, but but I was very fortunate to, what that, it provoked in me thinking, wow, I've had mentors my entire life and how lucky I've been. And for me, when we're talking about picking them, I remember my first day at Estee Lauder, my first week at Estee Lauder, the SVP of creative, a woman that worked uptown, I worked downtown, I had a very junior position. My first week on the job, she set up 2 meetings with me. One was with the lead of global corporate affairs for the company, and the other one was with the lead for PR for the company, both Latina women. And so she picked them for me. She said she found people with a similar background to mine that she thought could be helpful in my career. And those are still friends, mentors. They've gone to other companies. Some are still there. But I think sometimes the mentor is picked for you. And that's super important, as well as you start to, get your grounding maybe in a new company and new places. And as you start to build those relationships, having somebody facilitate them for you is super great.
and well, I'm still figuring it out, but what I've come to realize is that it doesn't have to be, the best at it, the biggest shot at, your practice or your professional network, but someone that is closer to, your certain situation. I've, been lucky enough to pick up mentors along the way. And right now, as I'm in that kind of turning point in my career of that seniority, I found myself a mentor that it was really a surprise for me. And that was something, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but like who would give me perspective. And I saw, I ran into an old client that I always thought was, big shot at his career, that's correlated to mine, that found himself out of a job after, after 35 years in the same institution. And I was like, well, maybe he can give me a little bit more, perspective on what was his career and what is his, thought in hindsight and what he could have done maybe differently. And, and maybe being out of a job is the best thing that ever happened to him. So I now, I kind of gave it a shot, called him up, and hey, I really need your advice. I'm at this, point in my career that I don't know how to go about it. So I'm trying, would you have coffee with me? And he was more than excited to have coffee with me, which is, completely different from my background. German-born, white male, completely different. And we've been in touch, and we touch base every week. All that to say is that this brings to still figure it out, because he was one that was at the right point, at the right moment of my career, and that I'm hoping to carry him or carry me along as I make these very important decisions in my career.
So I've spoken to so many executives about the sponsorship journey, and most of them will say they developed these relationships organically by themselves. They were not matched in a program. And so I think when it comes to finding this for each of you, don't rely on corporate programs to do this. They might happen, but they most likely will not. So here are the 3 ways that I've seen time and again people develop their sponsors. And I think depending on your stage of your career or what your interests are, one of these 3 hopefully will appeal to you. The first is to become a real expert in something, a real deep thought leadership or knowledge person. You're the best researcher, you're the best at clients, you're the best at something that people around you always say, oh yes, she's the best at that. And you build that reputation that way, and people will often come to you because they want you on their team, they know you'll be able to solve the problem. That really goes a long way, and it's great for people early in their careers when they really are developing a core skill set in something and they want to be known for it. So think about being that thought leader expert. And the person who comes to mind when I think about this is Condoleezza Rice, a former Secretary of State in the US. She was such a deep Soviet specialist, and that is what helped propel her career when no one had done that before. A Black woman like her, no one had been in that role. The second is to really be a go-getter, is what I call it. To be the person who just volunteers to do a lot of work, more than just your stated job and your responsibilities. And this is pretty straightforward for anyone too. You might not know what you want to be focused on, but if you find managers or other people around you who seem to need the help, run toward that, run toward that fire and really volunteer to do things that might go beyond to help that person. And the third is just being a great networker. We've seen so many people in our company take advantage of events and our business resource groups and just other times to interact with people. They connect with people on things far beyond work. They might be shared hobbies or a background or some skill, and that's how people meet each other. And it's amazing how that relationship, that kernel that starts there, can really go forward into work. So think about those 3 approaches, what might work for you, and try them with different people. But first, get a list of people that you really want to develop a relationship with and figure out your best approach.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is you all have different perspectives, which is it really depends a bit on you and your personality and where you're going to connect with the mentor. There's no set way, but at least a few ways to think about it. Moving on to the next question, I often, in my industry, consulting, I often joke with my wife that I continue to get older and everyone stays 25 over the years. But I say that because I find myself often learning tons from the younger folks that I work with or the newer folks coming into the business. And I was curious what you all have learned if you think about reciprocal mentoring, right, and what you've learned from mentoring or sponsorship relationships that you've had.
Yeah, as developing the career and getting more senior, it is unfortunately that effect of the pyramid, right? That I started to get a little bit more lonely in the ranks as you come up to the ranks, and looking to people that look like me may not be as easy as you grow. So as I've been gaining mentees, and in hindsight, like I thought it had only been the past 2-3 years, but looking back, I was mentoring a few of like my colleagues and as junior associates. So you never know, but I hope I did the best to give them the best advice. But looking and those mentees have become actual mentors to me. A lot of the mentees that I have remind me a lot of myself with their own individuality. So in mentoring them, I've found routes that I didn't have clear when I was going through the stages, and how I could change those going through my career. And they're great encouragers to keep going, and how building that network of women in my profession, of really helping each other. I see that with the mentees, and that's what I really get out of them, and not only just telling them, yeah, it's kind of hard, but you can do it. Be a go-getter. It takes a lot of effort to reach out to people. So also that, like, mentees, when they reach out to me, and looking back, it was like, that's great that they're doing that. It took me, a lot of effort to reach out to people that I wanted to connect, but I'm glad that they're doing it, and it comes out naturally. Like seeing it from the other side of the table now, having mentees reach out to me, it's great. You're, complimenting the mentors. So again, it's not just a one-way street. I have two mentees that I can really resonate with this, that they probably have helped me even more than I have helped them.
I will say, lately, the topic of reverse mentorship has come to me from a woman on my team who's really been pushing us to think a lot more about equity. So I've run this team for 6 years, and I think my inclination from the start was to really look at the problems that I thought we could scale up solutions toward. So having big programs for talent development, or big programs for entrepreneurs where we could reach thousands of people. That's always been my inclination. And I have a woman on my team who joined about 2 years ago, and she sort of sat back and she said, well, it's great that we have all this scale, but what about equity? Are we really picking the right programs to really help women who are disadvantaged across all dimensions to have the resources they need? So we might strive for equal outcomes, but of course, we're not starting from equal places. So the notion of equity, which is to give people tools so you can start from the same place, that's what we need to inject more of our work around. And so I've been really very influenced by this woman on my team. We are rethinking the things that we do. We are going to look at how our organization can be more equity driven from the start. And so that's just a topic I really appreciate, as I had not really been thinking about that in a very deep way.
And then at the Estee Lauder companies, there is formal reverse mentorship program, and it's incredible, right? I think the company shifted into that mode a few years ago as our consumer landscape changed, communication channels changed. They found the need to have these very senior, I'm talking executive leadership team, be paired with younger, more junior people to have them help them set up a TikTok account, understand, what maybe not LOL means, but, some iteration of that. And it's been incredible. I mean, I see people like Jane Lauder, my own boss, who's the president of Latin America, bring their bring their reverse mentor into meetings with leadership teams, you know, before answering a question, ask them what they think. I've seen how it's really, I mean, elevated their knowledge in all of these areas that are important to drive our business, but also given such visibility where it might have taken, you know, 10 years to be able to get to that point where you're presenting to people, you know, of the executive leadership team. So I love that program. Right now I'm kind of in limbo, not old enough or, you know, at that level or young enough to be part of the program, but I think you seek out those things like you mentioned informally, right? I still, you know, I'll ask somebody how to use PowerPoint in a new way, a new feature that might be there. So I think it's, you know, always seeking that out and also understanding one of the key values of Estee Lauder companies is around leading from every chair and translating that to learning from every chair and having teachers in every chair. And so how do you seek out those experiences that you're constantly evolving your knowledge base is really important. And I'm glad that the company has something formal, but also seek it out informally if yours doesn't.
If you come to consulting, you'll definitely be old enough for reverse mentoring. So, but
I'm sure I will.
but changing gears a little bit, women in mentoring or sponsoring, is it different, more important, the same? Any changes, any adjustments, right, as you think about women in mentoring? Is it more critical or less critical?
Meaning for women, is it more? Yeah, I think it's probably more. It's great for everyone. It's important for everybody. But women have, I think, a harder road to climb. You see it in the numbers still. Women don't have representation at the senior-most levels, and we see in every industry, really, that pipeline narrowing as you get to the top. So in order to get to the top, we do need more women who are more actively sponsored and counseled to get there. I'll tell a story about a woman who was at JP Morgan for quite a while who is just so inspirational and a great example of this. Her name is Tasunda Duckett, or T. Duckett, and right now she's the CEO of TIAA. So she had spent her career first at Fannie Mae, so really in the mortgage business, then came to JP Morgan and was in our mortgage business. And she created a very special sponsor relationship with a man named Gordon Smith, who ended up running our retail bank. And Gordon had seen her really early on in her career. And he was the kind of leader, probably the best at doing this that I've ever seen, at really seeing people not only at his table, but further down in the organization who really were talented and can use the help. And so he watched as T was moving around and had a very strong hand in really giving her other jobs. He promoted her to be head of our auto business. She did not have a background in autos or auto credit, but she did that for a few years. And then ultimately he promoted her to head the whole retail bank. And now she's the only Black woman who is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I really credit Gordon and I credit her talent as the reasons that she was moved around and really got all that experience to be able to now lead this company. So I think it's critical. It's not done enough. And men have a very big role to play here because women can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah, and I was just talking with Soraya before the panel, and we were talking about how women tend to undersell themselves and how, you know, with peers that you see men, you know, really putting themselves out there and saying, I'm the best of this, I've done all of this, and women tend to, you know, find like, I'm not perfect, this is all I'm missing, I've done this, but I still have to work on all these things, list of things. And that comes up on, you know, as growing in the career, like you have supervisors that review you, you supervise, you review your, as a supervisee, your supervisors. As you get more senior, you have to review yourself, and that's what we call the I love me memos. And so it's very critical at women's career to have that mentorship and really bring you and give you the advice of this is how, you know, you should highlight all of this. And we need that, I think and personally need that reminder whenever I can of, yes, help me, and even with my partner, you know, put bullet points, and whenever I said, however, it's like, no. Leave it at that, you're, you know, the best at this, period. Leave, you know, the constructive criticism aside, but for this, you know, you have to realize all your accomplishments. So having someone there I think it's very critical to give you advice and guide you, and whoever, shape or form that mentor is, a man, can give you a little bit more perspective on how to do it, or a woman, or whoever you look up to, or your partner, just to constantly advise and remind you of all the strengths that you hold.
For me, women mentors have made all the difference in my life. In my career, I've had virtually every door that's been open for me has been by a woman who's walked through it before. So, I think it's critical. And also, the understanding, we talked a little bit in the morning about work-life balance. I remember when I just got back from maternity leave, I was asked to speak on an internal panel. And they said, we want you to talk about work-life balance. And I'm like, guys, I can barely brush my hair. And this whole thing, I was like, I don't think that can exist. And having a woman tell me, you know what, it's fine. Answer the question how you want to answer the question. Maybe we need to change the question. So having women understand these common, I think, experiences and help you navigate them with, authenticity and transparency and honesty, I think has been very important. And then the topic of allies, I've also been incredibly lucky to have, amazing male allies in the company and my career as my bosses as well that have, been there for me. But I think women seek out women as much as you can as well, because the common experiences are really important as you grow.
Excellent. Final question, unless we take some from the audience, on just what advice do you have to all the folks here today about how to think about mentorship, sponsorship, how to drive it, how to give it?
Maybe I can jump in. I think if you're considering being a mentor, if you've been approached to be a mentor, make sure that you have the time for it and that you're prioritizing it. I think it's one thing to take the call and take the initial meeting of saying, sure, I'll mentor you. But if you really don't have the bandwidth, I think you're doing a disservice to the person that is seeking your mentorship. And then I think for the person that's looking for a mentor, seek them out, knock on the doors. I think you'd be surprised how many people are really looking to have that type of relationship and want to be mentors and have the time for it and the dedication. And like several of us have said, mentors can come from anywhere in your company, peers outside your company, et cetera. So I think it's like dedicate the time to it if you're asked to do it, and be brave enough to ask somebody to do it for you.
I would say on the sponsorship topic, you don't have to have the CEO or the senior leaders of your company be your sponsors. They can be somebody right around you. If you're starting your career, they could be someone at that very next level up, because what happens time and again is you develop that great relationship, and as they rise in their career, they're bringing you along with them. I'm sure you've seen this many times. People around you who are just helping you day to day, they're the ones who know your work the best. And so when you really get into that daily relationship and ability to share what you're working on and people see your skills, again, you will hopefully rise together. So I will say that on the sponsorship front. I will say something totally unrelated, and I will talk about compensation for a minute. You definitely want to talk to your peers who are male about their compensation. Do not only talk to your female friends about what they make, because that might not be the full answer. You need to get input from the male colleagues around you to see what they also make, so you're very prepared to go in and have those conversations on comp.
Having seen a lot of benchmarks, it is always different. It's an important.
And to tie that of the mentee from a mentee perspective, having seen it from the other end of being a mentor, mentee really is the one driving the relationship. While it's very important for the mentor to be available and really commit to the relationship, the mentee is the one driving what you're looking out of that mentorship. So, and as an experience, like do reach out, do follow up, don't stalk, but do follow up and do note the interest and that you're a go-getter. I think that is even more important as a sponsee of really having that focus and be interested in what you're building together with your sponsor.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Right here in front. I love it.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. We normally talk about asking someone to be your sponsor, but I also believe that you're all great women. And if someone asks you to be the sponsor, believe it, like accept it. Don't look like you are not yet prepared to be a sponsor. And say, no, I know someone that it will be better for you as a sponsor and likes your professional path. So it's also part of the women insecurities that we always say we're not ready. We have this yet to be corrected. Like I still have this to get better. So if someone already asks you, trust it and try to take the time to be a sponsor. It will also lead you on a really nice experience, and you will learn from your sponsor.
Yeah, the comment from the audience, in case folks in the back couldn't hear directly, was if someone reaches out to you to be a sponsor, you are qualified, right? Be excited and jump in, and you'll get a lot out of it. Any other thoughts? No? Otherwise, the panel will be saying after to sign up sponsorees and mentees. So, thanks so much, everybody. Thanks so much for being here.